Time for twins part. Yeah.
Wow, this is so diabolical. It's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of infuriating. Like, you're like an expert on all of this. Like my brother alluded to, is like, why don't we hear like this straightforward, like coming from you, like from our senators, from Congress, Republicans?
Well, there's a very delicate tightrope dance when it comes to international diplomacy and all of this. In fact, here's a great example. So Marco Rubio, who was between number 2 and number 3 running against Trump in the 2016 election on the Republican side, he is he has presidential ambitions still.
Right.
He is on the Senate Intelligence Committee. The very small gang of people who are allowed to oversee the Central Intelligence Agency, in the Senate. This was what came out of these church committee hearings. The CIA never had oversight until these hearings, and now it has got an oversight committee in the Senate and an oversight committee in the House. So he's in the oversight committee in the House, one of the 8 people or whatever. And he just yesterday came out with a statement saying, I always knew we were losing in Ukraine, but I could never say it until today because I didn't want to, create an international incident by just talking about it openly. And this is one of the issues when it comes to statecraft, which is what you're talking about inherently here is cloak and dagger work. The CIA has a legal obligation to lie about what it does. Under National Security Council 10-2, the plausible deniability doctrine of the CIA says you have to, everything you do on the operations side has to be formally deniable by the U.S. government. You are, it is a violation of your charter to tell people what you're doing. And so, you have this weird situation where, everything that the State Department and the Pentagon does has to be synchronized with what the CIA is doing. The CIA has to lie about what it's doing, which means the State Department and the Pentagon have to lie about what they're doing because it has to walk this tightrope dance of what we're saying overtly, but what we're doing covertly. And
Sounds like our media today.
Yeah, well, it's a state-mandated schizophrenia, and so when our media sort of echoes that schizophrenia, they're reverberating the echoes coming out of our foreign policy establishment. But this is where most money of the American budget goes. The Pentagon receives more funding than any other agency by far. We spend more money on managing the foreign our empire than we do on the homeland.
They're our citizens.
Yes, they are more powerful than our institutions for domestic affairs. They're more well funded. They have a license to do dirty tricks that we don't, because technically the domestic-facing institutions are bound by the Constitution. There are all manner of things for spying and surveillance, and working with the National Security Wing of the Justice Department, which is a privilege they have because they're allowed to do evil things to other countries.
Yeah.
And if they just launder that through a counterintelligence predicate at home or a democracy predicate now at home, they can turn it on us. And
Well, they have. January 6th, CIA, were they involved on January 6th in the crowd? I mean, a lot of people say it's a conspiracy theory, but after hearing what you just had to say, it's like,
It wouldn't shock me if they were.
I'm not,
Yeah, tread softly.
Where's the button? Next topic.
I don't want you to come up with this.
There are many strange aspects of January 6th that are yet to be unveiled that are going to take years. And frankly,
It's going to have to get declassified, probably.
I don't know what it will take to be able to have the political power to get to the bottom of various aspects of January 6th, because the issue is there's so much low-hanging fruit. I'm going to give you one example. We're still missing the missing money shot. There is a camera directly over. Have you seen a picture of the January 6th bomber taking out the bomb from the device on January 5th at roughly 8 o'clock p.m. and placing it at the park bench? Well, there is a camera directly overlooking the DNC building, which, by the way, was the exact same building that got burglarized in Watergate, funnily enough. I mean, it was a different location, but it's just 50 years before. But you'd think they'd have better than a 1 frame per second video camera on that. But nevertheless, to this day, there is a camera that was disclosed on September 8th, 2021 by the FBI. It was the last posted video on FBI.gov. We haven't had a new piece of video disclosed by the FBI in 3 years now almost. And
Since January 6th.
Yes. That video directly overlooks the park bench. You can actually, it's trained on the pipe bomber, the suspected pipe bomber, as he approaches the park benches and then is on his phone doing text messages. And then he leaves and does this sort of L walk around the DNC building. Now, according to the FBI's own timeline, and according to a camera actually on the opposite side of the bench, we are told that this pipe bomber walks right back up to that bench and takes out the bomb and places it directly next to the bench. Why does the camera cut off when this person leaves the area? Why don't we just have 5 minutes later from the same camera where that person will take the bomb out of the bag and place it? I mean, I know more about this topic than humanly,
Same thing happened to Epstein in jail. The camera shut off.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. It would be the world's easiest thing for the House Judiciary Committee right now to subpoena the FBI for the full tape. I mean, it's literally just, hey, you already have the stationary camera set up. It's already there's so much funny business around that placing them because Kamala Harris drove right by it. The Justice Department didn't even know that. The first year of indictments, the Justice Department, the DOJ wrote in briefs that these people running around the Capitol were hypothetically terrorizing the first elected female black vice president and the KKK Act type things around that.
She's not black, by the way. Just want to point that out.
I'll let you guys litigate that. All I'm saying is that this was in DOJ indictments, and the DOJ had to revise all of those when 1 year later it came out that Kamala Harris wasn't even inside because she was right next to the pipe bomb the whole time.
Same thing AOC said. She was under attack and she was running for her life. All that was bullshit.
Right. But there are all these open questions about what exactly the deal was with this pipe bomb that theoretically was the only mass casualty event, and why it is that the DC Fusion Cell was calling local hospitals in DC, telling them to stock up on extra blood supplies because 3 days later, they had a suspicion of a suspected mass casualty event. What was acting AG Jeffrey Rosen doing with this whole Quantico team around a suspected, weapon of mass destruction in D.C. that day? By the way, that's the legal term for a pipe bomb. Those people in the Whitmer Fednapping case, who were charged with possession of a weapon of mass destruction, those were pipe bombs. And who sold them those pipe bombs? The FBI. Not only that, it was the same FBI director, Stephen Tantuono, who was transferred to the D.C. office.
That's why they got acquitted. Everybody say, here's some bombs. Go blow that bitch up.
There's so much there on that, from the role of Mark Milley in the military to the role of the Department of Homeland Security.
And most of the footage was lost, right?
Well, it's being slowly disclosed. Mike Johnson just I think distributed another 5,000 hours or so. But it would be extremely easy if they really wanted it to just subpoena the FBI just for that one DNC pipe bomber tape. It's one thing. All you need is the chain of custody of that tape, and that would immediately solve half of the open issues around the pipe bomber. But one of the issues is the closer you get to blowing open these type of dirty deeds, the closer you get to getting indicted. Look at what just happened with this Hunter Biden situation. Yeah, Hunter Biden, as we just mentioned, was neck deep in CIA intrigues around Ukraine. What happened to all of the FBI folks who were supposed to be, who were right in the middle of that? So the FBI agent McGonigal, who was overseeing Hunter Biden's, the desk overseeing Hunter Biden there, just got arrested by the Justice Department. The FBI informant, who was the whistleblower for the House Judiciary Committee for these, this impeachment hearing, just got arrested. I made a tweet yesterday. It's like in the movie Goodfellas when there's this Lufthansa heist and just the bodies start disappearing. They start appearing in frozen meat meat storage units. This is everybody who gets close to this thing gets rolled up, and they're rolling up Trump. They're rolling up Rudy Giuliani and Jeff Clark. They're rolling up 19 of his lawyers in Georgia. They're talking about rolling up Speaker Mike Johnson. I just saw something the other day where they're trying to get him for these Russia links, which means someone DM'd him. It's like what they did to Paul Manafort.
It's hyperbole.
Well, but this is the thing. It gets back to the Thumbie War, right? It's when you can use this counterintelligence predicate. That's just an intelligence operation at home. It's they are not allowed to sick these Department of Dirty Tricks that are supposed to be the pit bull protecting the house from outsiders on people inside the house. But if you just go from, hey, it's not an intelligence operation, It's counterintelligence to stop, U.S. citizens from their role with foreign countries. That tips. That's that that little cheap shot, because there's no stopping this. You can't stop that little pinky finger, because it's 100 years in prison. You can indict a ham sandwich on it. You're dead in the water in a D.C. jury pool on this, and you're bankrupted even if you live through the process.
Right.
Paul Manafort, look what they did to him. He's Trump's campaign manager. They got him for disclosing internal, polling data. Well, that to someone who happened to be Russian. Well, that just means, hey, I think I'm going to win this election. Oh, really? What makes you say that? Well, looks like our polling shows we're going to win. Boom, 100 years in prison. I mean, it's that easy.
That's what Trump's referring to, the deep state.
Yeah,
that's exactly what the deep state is.
Right, and they're protecting their own. And we're living in a world where it's been like this for decades.
How do we, the people, stop this?
Yeah.
Well, this is the issue.
Can it be stopped?
It's like that question is like asking, how would people in a foreign country, stop the Pentagon and the State Department and the
to
CIA?
burn that bitch down.
It's like, well, no, probably just not. What I'm saying.
I'm just joking.
No, me too. But I'm just saying.
No, fuck it. Go get the trucks. I'm bringing the flags and all this. Yeah, I'm not condoning violence in any form. Yeah.
But it's a little bit like ants who think that they're in a king of the anthill, sort of coming up for land and seeing giant human creatures, and the ants are now going back into the old. They're like, oh my God, do you see the size of these things?
Yeah.
What we're up against is something that is sufficiently massive to totally recalibrate perceptions of strategy, I think, which is why whenever people ask me for solutions, my first way to answer that is have you gone through your 5 stages of grief yet on this? Because we can't even talk about solutions until people have fully gone through the phases of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. Because the solutions are going to seem so long into the future, so doesn't get us anywhere type thing, because it's what we're going to ultimately need to do at some point is have the blob itself, have the empires of the American the managers of the American empire come to our side on this. We're not. This is not something that can be done just completely outside in. We've constructed this government so that they have all of the power, and we're seeing right now. Now, some of these questions will be answered by the next 10 months in terms of the severity of what we're up against. A lot of people thought during when I was in the White House and all of this Russiagate stuff was happening, there was a pervading sense that it was really, really nasty, and they were rolling up a bunch of lieutenants, and they were bankrupting people. This is horrible, and this should never happen, but they're not going to indict Trump. I mean, that was sort of what, they're going to use it for pressure and leverage.
Right.
They're going to make sure that, he does a strike in Syria, for show. They're going to make sure that he gives money to various, foreign policy institutions that he didn't want to, in order to curry favor with enough of these sort of CIA Republicans that he fends off a consensus vote by Democrats. It'll change the negotiating leverage with the executive branch, but they're not going to actually roll him up. That is now changing. He's facing 700 years in prison. That's a death sentence. That's an assassination.
Right.
Now, there's the question of, are they going to, if they basically bankrupt him completely and bring him completely to his knees, would he agree in order to save his own skin at the last minute to, not run for president in order to, now that seems increasingly unlikely. And as the polling gets more and more in his favor, we're entering more and more of a bizarro world. But, you now have this situation just yesterday where the Supreme Court struck down an attempt by the state of Colorado to kick Trump off the ballot.
Right.
Well, so now Jamie
That's
Raskin,
the real threat against democracy. They're actually trying to remove him from the ballot box.
and now what was the response by that? The response was by Jamie Raskin, one of these, sort of blob monsters in Congress, to say, okay, well, now that the Supreme Court struck that down, we're going to go into Congress now. Now the House is going to pass a bill banning Trump from ballots nationwide. And then that will be a law on the books, and then the Supreme Court will actually have to look at it not from a judicial perspective from the states, but actually from the legislative one, which is a much higher bar.
Right.
They are going to keep raising the stakes, and the question is, at what point are they going to say, you know what, like, this is too much even for us, evil as we are. And they have continually, I think, surprised the greater American electorate and are losing people in the process. I mean, Joe Rogan was not, on our side, so to speak, like he was, 3 years ago. He talked very differently than now. You have people like Elon Musk. You have people like, you have tons of people from across the cultural, spectrum who are turning towards populism. And partially, Snoop Dogg was holding up the decapitated head of Donald Trump 4 years ago, and just did a tweet or whatever, an Instagram post saying, "Hey, he's actually not done anything bad to me." Right. As people are watching Trump get posterized by the blob, and everyone who's felt persecuted by the system is starting to basically become something of an insurgent themselves with respect to the pop. This
resonates to criminals.
Well, this is the classic issue that we have in all counterinsurgency. So the blob has these two different techniques for obliterating foreign populations when they get in our way. One of them is counterterrorism. We say, oh, you're a terrorist group, so you're dead. But the other one is counterinsurgency, which is a little bit like broader and more insidious. And this basically says if there's a political group rising to power in a country that we want to make sure that our puppet dictator or our puppet president who's giving us the oil, who's giving us the gas, who's giving us the sugar, who's giving us the gold and the diamonds and the raw materials and everything, we want to make sure that person stays in power so we can continue to have that financial and political relationship. But there's an opposition party that's running against him. We send in the counterinsurgency folks, and their goal is to basically wipe out this opposition party politically. And the issue is there's a struggle. Counterinsurgency doctrine is basically a strategic battle between legitimacy and control, which is this idea that you want to prevent the people's hearts and minds in that region from perceiving the opposition party as being legitimate. You want them to look illegitimate, totally isolated and delegitimized. But the more control you exert over the people in that region, the more they resent your control over them and the more they sympathize with the party you're trying to delegitimize. And so there's this strange situation where you want to control people without looking like you're controlling with them, because every time you control people overtly, you actually create, for every person that you get to your side by doing that, you're creating 10 resentful people who are the friends and families of the people who were fence sitters until they saw it happen to their cousin.
Right.
Or, the people who didn't care about one side or the other until, they were at the wedding of their, third cousin's best friend's, dog's babysitter and watched a drone strike, take out the people at the wedding. They're like, oh my God. Well, now on their side.
Yeah, this is scary because Trump, he's been found guilty of rape civilly, and he just been found guilty of fraud in New York. And I'm trying to wrap my head how a judge was able to do this in the United States of America, because it always seems treasonous to me, because they find him, what did they find him, $300-some million for? They said he actually committed fraud by going to the bank, getting a loan for the bank comes out to his property, values the property, gives him a loan, he pays the loan back. A judge comes in and says, no, that appraisal that the bank did was too much, that's fraud. I'm going to sue you for $330 million, and it's Trump's fault.
Yeah, it's almost $500 million.
They overrided a bank, a judge.
Yeah, fully paid back, no damages, but it's back. That's $500 million, and every single day it's $100,000 of interest, just the interest on it. So this is why I was buying pens earlier.
Right,
with the Trump International.